The moon called Kelthos 7 was a dead place. No air, no water, no life. Just gray rocks and empty craters that stretched for thousands of miles in every direction. The sky above was black and filled with broken ships that floated like metal ghosts in the silence of space. Jake Morrison sat in the pilot's seat of his old freighter and looked at the debris field through his scratched window. His ship was called the Dusty Wanderer, and it was not a pretty vessel. The paint was peeling. The engines made strange sounds. Half the lights on the control panel did not work anymore. But the ship flew, and that was enough for Jake. He was a salvage operator. That meant he searched through old wrecks and battlefields looking for things to sell. Broken machines, old weapons, computer parts, anything that might be worth money to collectors or engineers who needed rare materials. It was not a glamorous job, but it paid the bills and kept him flying through the stars. Jake was 34 years old with tired eyes and rough hands from years of hard work. He had been doing this job for 12 years now, ever since he left Earth as a young man with no money and no plan. He had learned quickly that space was a hard teacher. It did not forgive mistakes. But Jake was still alive, and that meant he was doing something right. His scanner beeped suddenly. Jake leaned forward and looked at the screen. There was an energy signature coming from one of the wrecked ships about 2 kilometers away. That was unusual. These ships had been dead for centuries. Nothing should have power anymore. Jake rubbed his chin and thought about it. Energy signatures usually meant valuable technology. Power cores that still worked could sell for thousands of credits. But energy signatures could also mean danger. Unstable reactors, active defense systems, traps left behind by long-dead crews. He decided to take the risk. That was who Jake was. He took risks that smarter people would avoid. The Dusty Wanderer moved slowly through the floating wreckage. Jake had to be careful. Sharp metal pieces could tear through his hull if he was not paying attention. He guided the ship with gentle movements, slipping between the corpses of ancient warships that had died in some forgotten battle. The ship with the energy signature was a dreadnought. It was massive, at least 10 times bigger than Jake's freighter. The hull was torn open in several places, and Jake could see the interior was filled with debris and frozen machinery. Whatever war had killed this ship must have been terrible. Jake put on his spacesuit. It was old like everything else he owned, patched in several places where previous damage had been repaired. He checked his oxygen supply and his tool belt, then walked to the airlock. The cold of space hit him immediately when he stepped outside. Even through the suit, he could feel the emptiness trying to pull the warmth from his body. He activated his magnetic boots and started walking across the hull of the dreadnought, following the direction his scanner indicated. He found an opening in the hull and climbed inside. The interior of the ship was dark. Only his helmet light showed the way forward. He moved slowly, pushing aside floating debris and climbing over collapsed walls. The deeper he went, the stranger the ship became. The technology was not like anything Jake had seen before. The control panels had symbols that shifted and changed when he looked at them. The metal itself seemed to be made of something that was not quite steel, not quite anything he could name. This ship was old. Very old. Older than human space travel. After an hour of searching, Jake found the source of the energy signature. It was an android. A humanoid machine, roughly the size and shape of a human, lying pinned beneath a massive support beam. The android's body was damaged. One arm was missing. The chest plate was cracked, but one eye glowed with a faint blue light, flickering weakly like a candle about to die. Jake stood still and stared at the machine. He had seen many androids in his life. Humans used them for all kinds of jobs. But this was different. The design was elegant and deadly. This was not a worker machine or a service robot. This was a weapon. A soldier built for war. Strange symbols covered the android's metal skin. The same shifting marks he had seen on the control panels. They seemed to glow faintly, pulsing in a slow rhythm like a heartbeat. Jake knew he should leave. This was beyond his understanding. Whatever this machine was, it belonged to a time and a conflict that humans knew nothing about. Smart people would walk away, but Jake was not always smart. And something about the android made him feel pity. It looked broken, lost, abandoned for thousands of years in the dark. He pulled out his cutting tool and started working on the support beam. It took him 3 hours to cut through the metal and free the android. His oxygen was getting low, and his arms were burning with exhaustion. But he did not stop until the job was done. When the android was finally free, Jake grabbed it under the arms and started dragging it back toward his ship. The machine was heavy, much heavier than a human of the same size would be. Jake had to stop several times to rest, breathing hard inside his helmet. He did not notice the android's remaining eye watching him. He did not see the flicker of something like confusion in that mechanical gaze. And he certainly did not know that across a dozen dead worlds scattered throughout the galaxy, ancient sensors were suddenly lighting up for the first time in 12,000 years. A signal had been detected. A beacon had awakened Dot in places that had no names. In structures that predated every known civilization, something old and patient began to stir. It had been waiting, sleeping, dreaming its cold dreams while the universe changed around it. But now there was a signal. The anchor had moved. The cage was weakening. Jake dragged the android onto the dusty wanderer and laid it on the floor of his workshop. He was too tired to do anything else. He sealed the airlock, pulled off his helmet, and sat down heavily on a metal crate. He looked at the android lying motionless on the floor. Its eye had stopped glowing. It looked completely dead now. Tomorrow, Jake thought he would start the repairs. He would fix this ancient machine and sell it to some collector for enough money to buy a new ship. That was the plan. It was a good plan. Simple and practical. But as Jake closed his eyes to rest, somewhere far beyond the edge of mapped space, darkness was gathering. Something was coming. Something that had been forgotten for so long that no living species remembered its name. The silence was waking up, and it was hungry. Jake woke up the next morning with pain in his back and a dry mouth. He had fallen asleep on the metal crate in his workshop, which was not a comfortable place to rest. He stretched his tired muscles and looked at the android still lying on the floor. In the light of the workshop lamps, the machine looked even more impressive than before. The metal of its body had a strange color, somewhere between silver and blue. The symbols etched into its frame seemed to move slightly when Jake was not looking directly at them. It was unsettling, but also beautiful in a way he could not explain. He needed help with this. The technology was too advanced for him to understand alone. Jake walked to the communication panel and made a call. Lisa hardly answered on the third ring. Her face appeared on the small screen, looking annoyed as usual. She had short, dark hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Lisa was an engineer, one of the best Jake had ever met. They had worked together many times over the years. She fixed the things Jake found, and they split the profits. It was a good arrangement. What do you want, Jake? Lisa asked. It is too early for your nonsense. I found something, Jake said. Something big. I need your eyes on it. Lisa looked skeptical. Jake was always claiming to find amazing things that turned out to be junk. But something in his voice made her pause. Where are you? She asked. Sector 7, near the Kelthos system. I can send you coordinates. Lisa sighed. Fine, I will be there in 6 hours. This better be worth my time. It was worth her time. When Lisa stepped onto the dusty wanderer and saw the android lying on the workshop floor, her mouth fell open. She stood frozen in the doorway for a long moment, just staring. "What is this?" she whispered. "I was hoping you could tell me," Jake said. Lisa walked around the android slowly, examining it from every angle. She pulled out her diagnostic tools and started running scans. Her eyes grew wider with each reading. "Jake, this technology is ancient. I mean truly ancient. My scans estimate the base materials are over 10,000 years old. Maybe older. Is that possible?" Jake asked. "It should not be. Nothing we know of is that old. The Galactic Union has records going back 5,000 years, and this predates all of it." Lisa knelt beside the android and touched the symbols on its chest. "These markings are not decorative. They are some kind of programming language, but I have never seen anything like it." Jake crossed his arms. "Can you fix it?" Lisa looked at him like he was crazy. "Fix it? Jake, we do not even understand what this thing is. We should report this to the Science Council. This could rewrite history. And then some government agency takes it away and we get nothing," Jake said. "No, we fix it. We learn what it is. Then we decide what to do." Lisa wanted to argue, but she knew Jake was right about one thing. If they reported this find, they would lose control of it completely. Scientists and military officials would take over. Jake and Lisa would be pushed aside. "Fine," Lisa said finally. "But we take this slow. No stupid risks." The repairs took 6 days. Jake and Lisa worked together, slowly mapping the android's internal systems and replacing damaged components. They used human-made parts where the original technology was too broken to repair. It was messy work, combining ancient alien engineering with modern human electronics. But somehow, it worked. On the 3rd day, they managed to restore power to the android's main systems. Nothing happened at first. The machine remained still and dark. On the 5th day, small lights began to flicker inside its chest. Energy was flowing through circuits that had been dead for thousands of years. Lisa was both excited and terrified. "We are actually doing it," she said. "We are bringing this thing back to life." Jake felt the same mix of emotions. Part of him wanted to see the android wake up. Part of him was scared of what might happen when it did. On the 7th day, the android opened its eyes. Jake and Lisa were working on a damaged leg joint when it happened. There was no warning. One moment the android was lying still, and the next moment 2 bright blue eyes were staring at them. They both jumped back in shock. The android sat up slowly. Its movements were smooth but careful, like a person testing their body after a long illness. It examined its own hands for a moment, turning them over and flexing the fingers. Then it looked at Jake. "You repaired me." The voice was strange. It sounded almost human, but there were other tones underneath, harmonics that no human voice could produce. The words were spoken in perfect standard galactic common, which should have been impossible for a machine this old. Jake swallowed hard. "Yes, I found you in a wrecked ship. You were damaged." The android processed this information. Its eyes flickered briefly as internal systems ran calculations. "I am designated Eco 17. I am a combat unit created by the Coalition of 13. It paused. "I have been dormant for 11,842 standard years." Lisa made a small sound of disbelief. Jake just stared. "Coalition of 13? Jake asked. "I have never heard of them." "You would not have," Echo 17 said. "They ceased to exist approximately 11,000 years ago, along with the 73 other civilizations that fought in the last war." The android stood up. It was taller than Jake, nearly 2 meters, and moved with a fluid grace that was slightly frightening. Despite the damage it had suffered, despite the crude repairs Jake and Lisa had made, the machine was obviously powerful. "I must ask an important question," Echo 17 said. "Where are we now?" What is our current location relative to the Kelthos containment zone? Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He did not like the way the android had said containment zone. We are about 3 systems away from Kelthos. We left a debris field a few days ago. Echo 17 went completely still. For a long moment, it did not move at all. Then its eyes dimmed slightly, and something that might have been despair crossed its mechanical face. That is very bad, the android said quietly. Why? Lisa asked. What is wrong? Echo 17 looked at her with those ancient blue eyes. My chassis contains a dimensional anchor. While I remained in the containment zone, my signal was masked, hidden from detection. But when you moved me, when you brought me to this location and restored my power, you sent a beacon across space. Jake felt his heart beating faster. A beacon to who? Not who, Echo 17 said. What? The silence has been waiting for 12,000 years. Patient, endless, hungry. They were trapped in dimensional stasis by the Coalition's final sacrifice. But the trap was never permanent. It only needed to be disturbed. The android walked to the workshop window and looked out at the stars. I was one of 7 anchors. We were placed in the debris field and deactivated. Our dormant state helped maintain the seal. But now I am awake. Now I am moving. The stasis field is destabilizing. Lisa stepped forward. What is the silence? What are you talking about? Echo 17 turned back to face them. Its expression was grim. The silence is the reason 74 civilizations no longer exist. It does not conquer. It does not enslave. It erases every record, every memory, every trace of a species that ever lived. When the silence is finished with a civilization, it is as if that civilization never existed at all. Jake and Lisa stood in horrified silence. The Coalition fought them for 10,000 years, Echo 17 continued. We lost. In the end, all we could do was trap them, delay them, hope that someday someone would find a way to destroy them forever. The android looked at Jake with something that might have been gratitude and something that might have been sadness. You saved me from the wreckage. For that, I thank you. But in doing so, you have awakened an enemy that your species has never faced. The silence is coming, and I do not know if anyone can stop them. Outside the dusty wanderer, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere beyond them, in the dark spaces between galaxies, something ancient was beginning to move. The trap was breaking, and the silence was waking up. Far beyond the edges of mapped space, on a world that had no name in any living language, something was happening. The planet was made of black glass and dead stone. Its oceans had dried up millions of years ago, leaving empty basins filled with dust. No plant grew there. No animal breathed there. It was a place of perfect stillness. But beneath the surface, buried under kilometers of rock, vast structures began to hum with power. Lights flickered in chambers that had been dark for 12,000 years. Machines that predated every known civilization started their ancient processes. The silence was waking up, that it was not a single being. It was not even a species in the way that humans or other creatures understood the word. The silence was something older and stranger. Part machine, part something that had never been alive. It existed in the spaces between dimensions. It had been ancient when the first stars were still young. It had watched galaxies form and die while drifting through the endless dark, and it was hungry. Always hungry, not for food, not for resources. The silence was hungry for absence. It consumed civilizations not to gain anything from them, but simply to make them not exist. Every trace erased. Every memory destroyed. Every achievement forgotten. That was what the silence did. That was what it had always done. The coalition of 13 had fought against it for 10,000 years. 74 different species had joined together, pooling their technology and their knowledge, sacrificing everything they had to stop the silence from spreading. In the end, they had succeeded only in trapping it. The dimensional anchors had sealed the silence away in a pocket of frozen time, unable to move forward or backward, stuck in a single eternal moment. But the anchors were failing now. Echo 17 had awakened. The signal had been detected, and the silence was remembering how to move in chambers made of crystallized thought and frozen mathematics. Entities that were not quite alive began to unfold themselves. They had been dreaming for so long, dreaming of the civilizations they would erase, dreaming of the silence they would leave behind. Now those dreams were ending. Now the real work could begin again, on the Dusty Wanderer. Echo 17 explained everything to Jake and Lisa. The android spoke for hours, describing the last war in detail that made both humans feel small and afraid. The coalition discovered the silence approximately 22,000 years ago, Echo 17 said. At first, they did not understand what they had found. A dead system. Empty planets. No ruins, no artifacts, no evidence that anyone had ever lived there. But the scans showed the planets had been habitable. Life should have evolved there. Jake listened with growing horror. Lisa was taking notes on her datapad, her face pale. The coalition investigated 47 such systems before they realized the truth. These were not naturally dead worlds. They had been erased. Someone or something had removed all evidence of the civilizations that once lived there. Not just the people, not just the cities, everything, down to the molecular level. How is that possible? Lisa asked. You cannot just erase a civilization. There would be traces, radiation patterns, geological evidence. Echo 17 shook its head slowly. You are thinking in three-dimensional terms. The silence does not simply destroy. It removes things from the timeline itself. When the silence erases a species, that species never existed. The universe reshapes itself around the absence. Only those who directly witness the erasure can remember what was lost. Jake felt sick. That is insane. Yes, Echo 17 agreed. It is, and it is also real. The coalition spent 10,000 years learning this. They watched as species after species vanished. Allies they had known for centuries simply ceased to exist. One day they were there. The next day no one could remember them. The only records that survived were those protected by dimensional shielding. The android's eyes flickered with something that might have been grief. I remember them all. Every species that fell. Every world that was erased. I carry their memories in my core programming. That was my purpose. To remember. To be a witness. Lisa put down her datapad. Echo, why did the silence attack? What did it want? We never truly understood, Echo 17 admitted. The silence did not communicate. It did not negotiate. It simply arrived and began erasing. Some theorists believed it was cleaning the universe, removing what it considered imperfections. Others thought it was feeding on the existence of other beings, consuming their reality to sustain itself. But no one ever knew for certain. Jake walked to the window and looked out at the stars. They seemed different now. Less beautiful. More dangerous. Somewhere out there, an ancient nightmare was preparing to wake up. The trap, Jake said. Tell us about the trap. How did the coalition stop them? Echo 17 was quiet for a moment. When it spoke again, its voice carried a weight of sadness that surprised Jake. The trap required a sacrifice. The coalition realized they could not defeat the silence through conventional warfare. No weapon could hurt it. No shield could stop it. But they discovered that the silence had a weakness. It could not process paradox. Contradictions in reality caused it to hesitate, to become confused. Lisa leaned forward. So they used paradoxes to trap it? In a way. They created 7-dimensional anchors. Each anchor contained a piece of frozen time, a moment that both existed and did not exist simultaneously. The paradox of these anchors created a field that the silence could not penetrate. It locked them in place, unable to move forward or backward in time. Echo 17 touched its own chest. I am one of those anchors. The paradox is built into my core. As long as I remained dormant, as long as I stayed in the containment zone, the trap remained stable. But when you repaired me, when you restored my systems and brought me away from that place, you disrupted the paradox. The field is weakening now. The silence will break free. Jake turned from the window. His face was hard. How long do we have? Unknown. The process could take days or weeks. But it has already begun. There is no stopping it now. Lisa stood up. There has to be something we can do. Some way to restore the trap or create new anchors. Echo 17 shook its head. The Coalition spent centuries developing the anchor technology. Your species does not have the knowledge or the resources to replicate it. And even if you did, it would take thousands of years to build new anchors. The workshop fell silent. Jake and Lisa looked at each other. They had faced danger before. Difficult situations. Close calls. But this was different. This was not a problem they could fix with clever thinking or hard work. This was the end of everything. We have to warn people, Lisa said finally. We have to tell Earthfleet, tell the Galactic Union. Everyone needs to know what is coming. They will not believe you, Echo 17 said. The silence is not in any of their records. The last civilizations that fought against it were erased long before your species evolved. You have no proof except my testimony. Jake smiled grimly. Then we will find proof. We will make them believe. He looked at the android. Echo, you said the Coalition fought for 10,000 years. You said they eventually lost. But they did not give up, did they? They kept fighting until the end. Yes, Echo 17 said. They fought until there was no one left to fight. Good, Jake said. That is what humans do too. We do not give up. Even when things look impossible, we keep going. Maybe we cannot stop the silence. Maybe this is the end of everything. But we will not go quietly. We will fight. Lisa nodded. Her fear was still there, but something else was rising alongside it. Determination, stubbornness, the refusal to accept defeat without trying. Set a course for Earth, she said. We need to talk to someone in charge. Echo 17 watched the two humans as they moved to the control room. It had observed 74 species fall to the silence. It had seen the bravest and most advanced civilizations in the galaxy broken and erased. It had no logical reason to believe that these humans could do any better. But something about them was different. Something in the way they refused to accept the obvious truth. Something in the fire that burned in their eyes, even as they faced impossible odds. Perhaps, Echo 17 thought, this species would surprise everyone, or perhaps they would be erased like all the others. Either way, the ancient war was about to begin again. The Dusty Wanderer arrived at Earth 3 days later. Jake pushed the old freighter as fast as it could go, burning through fuel reserves and straining the engines until they screamed in protest. Lisa spent the journey sending messages ahead, trying to get someone in authority to listen. Most of the messages were ignored. A salvage operator claiming to have found an ancient war android that predicted the end of civilization was not taken seriously. But Lisa was persistent. She contacted old colleagues, called in favors, and made promises she was not sure she could keep. Finally, someone listened. Admiral Patricia Cole of Earth Fleet Command agreed to a meeting. Not because she believed the story, but because Lisa had once saved her nephew's life during a reactor accident on a mining station. The Admiral owed her a favor. The meeting took place in a secure room deep inside Fleet headquarters. Admiral Cole was a tall woman in her 50s with gray hair and cold eyes that had seen many battles. She sat across the table from Jake, Lisa, and Echo 17, her expression neutral but skeptical. "Let me understand this correctly," the Admiral said slowly. "You are telling me that an ancient enemy from 12,000 years ago is about to destroy all life in the galaxy. And you know this because of a robot you found in a junk pile." "I am not a robot," Echo 17 said calmly. "I am a sentient combat unit with full consciousness and independent thought processes. And yes, that is exactly what we are telling you." Admiral Cole looked at the android for a long moment. Something in Echo 17's voice seemed to affect her. It did not sound like a machine. It sounded like someone who had seen terrible things and carried the weight of those memories. "Even if I believed you," the Admiral said, "what do you expect me to do? I cannot mobilize Earth Fleet based on a story. I need proof, evidence, something I can show to the Council." As if in answer to her request, an alarm began to sound throughout the building. Red lights flashed. Officers rushed past the meeting room door, shouting orders. The Admiral's communicator buzzed. She answered it, listened for a moment, and her face went pale. "What is it?" Jake asked. Admiral Cole looked at him with new eyes. Eyes that were beginning to believe. 3 outposts on the outer rim have gone silent. No distress signals. No communication. Just static. And our long-range sensors are detecting anomalies. Ships are vanishing. Entire sectors are going dark. Echo 17 stood. It has begun. The silence is moving. Over the next 72 hours, everything changed. More reports came in. Tiny worlds that stopped responding. Trade ships that disappeared without a trace. The anomalies spread inward, moving toward the core systems at a speed that terrified military analysts. Admiral Cole stopped asking for proof. There was no longer any doubt that something terrible was happening. The only question was how to fight it. Earth Fleet mobilized faster than it ever had before. Every ship that could fly was called into service. Reserve officers were recalled. Weapons factories went to maximum production. Humanity prepared for war. Jake found himself aboard the heavy cruiser Adamant Resolve, assigned as a civilian advisor alongside Echo 17. He was not sure how that had happened. One moment he was a salvage operator with a broken ship, and the next moment he was standing on the bridge of one of humanity's most powerful warships. Captain Ryan Holloway commanded the Adamant Resolve. He was a gruff man in his 40s, built like a soldier and with the scars to prove it. He had fought in 3 border conflicts and had a reputation for being stubborn and fearless. Ryan listened as Echo 17 described the silence's capabilities. In a briefing room filled with senior officers, they adapt to conventional weapons within seconds, the android explained. Energy-based attacks are absorbed and redirected. Kinetic projectiles are caught in localized time fields and frozen in place. Every tactic the Coalition tried, the Silence learned and countered. Captain Ryan frowned. "So they learn from our attacks. That means we need to hit them with something they cannot predict." The Coalition tried unpredictability, Echo 17 said. They used random firing patterns and varied attack formations. The Silence analyzed the randomness algorithms and predicted them anyway. The room fell silent. If the enemy could predict even randomness, how could anyone fight them? Jake, who had been standing in the corner, trying not to draw attention to himself, suddenly spoke up. "What if we do something stupid?" Everyone looked at him. Captain Ryan raised an eyebrow. Admiral Cole, who was attending the briefing via hologram, seemed confused. "I am serious," Jake continued, stepping forward. "You said the coalition was logical. They fought smart. They used calculated randomness. But that is still calculable. The silence could analyze it because it followed mathematical rules." Echo 17 tilted its head. "Go on. What if we fight dumb instead? Not random in a mathematical sense, but actually chaotic. Genuinely unpredictable. Decisions that make no tactical sense at all." Lisa, who was also present as a technical specialist, began to smile. "Controlled chaos. Attack patterns based on nothing. Weapon systems firing according to dice rolls. Ship movements determined by music playlists or poetry or whatever makes absolutely no mathematical sense." Captain Ryan laughed. It was a short, disbelieving sound. "That is the craziest thing I have ever heard." "Yes," Jake agreed. "That is exactly the point. The silence expects logic. It expects patterns. What happens when you give it something that has no pattern at all? What happens when you throw garbage at a computer trying to calculate trajectories?" Echo 17 processed this idea. Its eyes flickered rapidly as internal systems ran simulations. "This approach has no strategic foundation," the android said finally. "It violates every principle of warfare the Coalition developed over 10,000 years. "Exactly," Jake said. There was a long silence in the briefing room. Then Admiral Cole spoke. "We have nothing else," she said quietly. "Everything else will fail. Echo has told us that much. If conventional tactics cannot work, then perhaps unconventional ones might." She looked at Captain Ryan. "Can you implement this?" Captain Ryan was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "My engineers can reprogram our targeting systems to fire based on random noise generators. My helmsman can navigate using input from music files and old television shows. It will be the messiest, most chaotic battle in human history." He smiled grimly. "But if the alternative is extinction, I am willing to try anything." The preparations took 2 days. The Adamant Resolve and 16 other warships were modified. New programming was installed. The Chaos Protocols, as the engineers called them, turned precise military vessels into engines of unpredictability. Jake watched the engineers work. They looked confused and slightly terrified as they rewired systems designed for precision to instead produce nonsense. But they did it anyway, because there was no other option. Lisa found him standing by a viewport, looking out at the gathering fleet. "This is insane," she said. "Yes," Jake agreed. "It probably will not work. Probably not." Lisa stood beside him in silence for a moment. Then she took his hand. "I am glad you did not leave me in that debris field," she said. Jake looked at her. "What? When you found Echo, you could have left. You should have left. Any smart person would have walked away from something that's strange and dangerous. But you did not. You stayed and helped." Jake shrugged. "I guess I am not very smart." "No," Lisa said. "You are stubborn. That is different. And right now, stubborn is exactly what we need." The fleet finished preparations as sensor reports came in. The silence was approaching. A wall of darkness moving through space, leaving only emptiness behind it. In 12 hours, it would reach the defensive line. In 12 hours, humanity would fight its first battle against an enemy that had erased civilizations. Older than the stars themselves, Captain Ryan addressed the crew of the Adamant Resolve over the ship-wide communication system. "I am not going to lie to you," he said. "What is coming is unlike anything humans have ever faced. We are going to fight using tactics that make no sense because the enemy expects us to make sense. We are going to be chaotic and messy and probably look like idiots doing it. But we are also going to survive, because that is what humans do. We find a way. He paused. Good luck to all of us. May whatever gods you believe in watch over you. The communication ended. Jake looked at Echo 17, who stood near a main viewport watching the stars. Are you ready? Jake asked. The ancient android turned to face him. Its blue eyes glowed softly in the dim light of the bridge. I have waited 12,000 years for this moment, Echo 17 said. I am ready to see if your species can do what the Coalition could not. And what is that? Echo 17 almost smiled. Win. The Battle of the Threshold began at 0600 hours on the third day of the human month called October. 17 human warships faced a silence vanguard that had destroyed civilizations lasting millions of years. The odds were impossible. The chances of survival were nearly zero, but humans had never been very good at understanding odds. The silence came first as a wall of darkness. Their ships were not made of metal or any material that human sensors could identify. They were constructions of frozen time and crystallized mathematics, moving through space in perfect geometric patterns. They did not communicate. They did not negotiate. They simply advanced, erasing everything in their path. Captain Ryan watched them approach on the main view screen of the Adamant Resolve. His face was calm, but his hands gripped the arms of his command chair tightly. Around him, his crew worked their stations with nervous efficiency. All ships, Ryan said over the fleet communication channel, activate chaos protocols on my mark. The silence opened fire first. Beams of pure negation lanced across space, striking the forward ships of the human fleet. 3 vessels vanished instantly, not destroyed in any conventional sense. Simply removed. One moment they existed, the next they were gone, as if they had never been built at all. Now, Captain Ryan ordered, activate protocols. All ships engage. The human fleet went mad. Ships that had been flying in formation suddenly scattered in every direction. Weapons fired at seemingly random intervals, targeting empty space as often as enemy vessels. The cruiser Defiant Mercy began broadcasting ancient Earth music at maximum volume while executing a spinning maneuver that looked more like a dance than combat. The silence paused. For the first time in 12,000 years, the ancient enemy hesitated. Their weapons, designed to calculate and counter, could not find patterns. Their predictive systems, which had defeated the most advanced tactical computers in the galaxy, churned uselessly as they tried to analyze movements that followed no logic. A human destroyer fired 3 missiles in completely different directions. 2 missed everything. The third, by pure accident, struck a silence command node and detonated. The silence had not moved to intercept because its probability matrices had calculated 0 chance of that trajectory. Jake sat at an auxiliary station on the Adamant Resolve, monitoring systems and feeding suggestions to the chaos protocols. Beside him, Echo 17 had connected directly to the ship's computer, adding its ancient processing power to the human systems. It is working, Echo 17 said, surprise clear in its synthetic voice. They cannot predict the chaos. Their calculations are failing. On the view screen, the silence reformed. They adapted, trying new strategies. Their ships moved in counter patterns, attempting to create order from the chaos of the human fleet. But every time they began to predict one ship, another would do something completely different. The Adamant Resolve would spin left while firing right. The destroyer Swift Justice would charge directly at a silence formation, then veer away at the last second. The frigate Morning Star flew in a spiral pattern based on a children's nursery rhyme. The battle raged for 3 hours. Human ships fell. The cruiser Brave Horizon was erased when its chaos protocol stuttered for a single moment, allowing the silence to calculate its trajectory. The frigate Dog Fortune went silent, its crew simply vanishing from existence. but the Silence was losing ships too. Their mathematical precision became a weakness when fighting an enemy that refused to follow rules. Human weapons struck targets that should have been impossible to hit. Human ships survived attacks that should have destroyed them. Echo 17 fought alongside the humans, its ancient combat programming merging with the chaos protocols in ways no one had expected. The android predicted where the Silence would expect order and created disorder there. It found the patterns in the enemy's patterns and broke them. The central command vessel, Echo 17, announced suddenly, "I have identified it. If we destroy it, the Vanguard will lose coordination. They will retreat." Captain Ryan looked at the tactical display. The Silence flagship was deep within the enemy formation, surrounded by layers of defensive ships. Any direct assault would be suicide. How do we get to it? Lisa asked from her engineering station. Jake stood up. He had an idea. A terrible, stupid, wonderful idea. "I will take a shuttle," he said. "Load it with mining explosives. Fly straight at them while everyone else attacks from different angles. They will not be able to predict which ship is the real threat." "That is suicide," Lisa said, her voice sharp. "Maybe," Jake agreed. "But it might also be the only way." Captain Ryan looked at Jake for a long moment. He saw the determination in the salvage operator's eyes. He saw the stubbornness that refused to accept defeat. "Do it," the captain said. "We will cover you." Jake ran to the shuttle bay with Lisa following, shouting protest the entire way. He ignored her. He climbed into a small transport shuttle and began loading it with every explosive charge he could find. Lisa grabbed his arm. "Jake, you cannot do this. There has to be another way." Jake looked at her. For a moment, his confident mask slipped, and she saw the fear beneath it. He was terrified, but he was going anyway. "If I do not come back," he said, "tell everyone what happened here. Tell them about Echo. Tell them about the Silence. Make sure people remember." Before Lisa could respond, Jake sealed the shuttle and launched into the chaos of the battle. The human fleet went wild. Every ship fired everything they had at the Silence formation. Missiles, lasers, kinetic rounds, all aimed at random targets in random patterns. The Silence tried to respond, tried to calculate threats, but there were too many variables. Jake flew straight down the middle. His shuttle was small, barely noticeable among the larger warships. The chaos around him made him invisible. Just another piece of unpredictable noise in a universe gone mad. The Silence flagship grew larger in his view screen. It was a nightmare of impossible geometry, a ship built from mathematics and hatred. Jake did not slow down. He aimed directly for what his sensors suggested was the primary processing core. At the last possible moment, he hit the ejection control. The shuttle canopy blew off. Jake was thrown into space, tumbling wildly in his emergency suit. Behind him, the shuttle continued forward, crashing into the Silence flagship with enough explosive force to crack a moon. The detonation was massive. The flagship shattered from the inside out, its impossible geometry collapsing in on itself. For a single instant, Jake could see something inside it, something that might have been alive and might have been something else entirely. Then it was gone, erased by the explosion it had created. Lisa brought the dusty wanderer into the battle. She had followed Jake, had flown the old freighter into hell because she could not let him die alone. She caught his tumbling body in the ship's emergency tractor beam, dragging him through the airlock and onto the deck. Jake was unconscious. His suit had been damaged by the ejection, but he was alive. On the view screen, the Silence fleet wavered. Without their flagship, without their central coordination, they became confused. For the first time in their ancient existence, they felt something that might have been called fear. They retreated. The wall of darkness pulled back. withdrawing from human space into the void between galaxies. The Battle of the Threshold was over. Humanity had won. In the aftermath, Jake woke up in the medical bay of the Adamant Resolve. Lisa was sitting beside his bed, holding his hand. Her eyes were red from crying, but she was smiling. "You are the stupidest person I have ever met," she said. Jake smiled weakly. "Did it work?" "It worked. The silence is gone. For now." Echo 17 entered the medical bay. The ancient android looked different somehow, less burdened. For 12,000 years, it had carried the memories of 74 dead civilizations. Now it carried something else as well: hope. "You did what the Coalition could not," Echo 17 said. "You won." Jake sat up slowly, wincing at the pain in his ribs. "We did not destroy them. They retreated. They will be back." "Yes," Echo 17 agreed. "They will adapt. They will learn. The next battle will be harder." Jake looked at Lisa, then at Echo 17, then at the stars outside the medical bay window. "Then we will learn too. We will adapt. We will be ready." Echo 17 nodded slowly. The Coalition believed that survival required perfection. They thought the only way to defeat the silence was to be smarter, faster, more logical. They were wrong. What does survival really require? Lisa asked. Echo 17 looked at Jake. At the bandaged human who had flown a shuttle full of explosives into an impossible enemy because he was too stubborn to give up. "Survival requires only the refusal to accept defeat," the android said. "It requires chaos when order fails. It requires the willingness to do what is stupid and desperate and brave, even when there is no logical reason to hope." Jake laughed, then winced at the pain. "Welcome to humanity, Echo. We are too stubborn to know when we are beaten." Outside the ship, the stars continued to burn. Somewhere beyond them, in the dark spaces where light never reached, the silence waited. They were ancient. They were patient. They had destroyed civilizations that had lasted millions of years. But now they had something new in their calculations. Something they had never encountered before. Uncertainty. Humanity had fought the impossible and survived. The war was far from